Finish her. Johnny Cage win.
Are you prepared to test your might? If so, then Mortal Kombat could be the game for you. Released in arcades in 1992 by Midway, this is another one-on-one fighter that looked to test its mettle against the undisputed king of one-on-one beat-em-ups, Street Fighter 2. Few people had been prepared for the success of Street Fighter 2, not even Capcom themselves. And so, with the arcades getting a new lease on life, it was time for the challengers to step up and be counted, and try and steal a slice of the once again lucrative arcade market. In order to stand out from the crowd, Midway had decided to use digitised graphics and captured footage from little known or underappreciated martial art actors like Ho Sung Pak, who played Raphael in the Ninja Turtles 2 movie, and also choreographed the fight sequences for the same movie, and Daniel Pesina, who played a foot soldier in the Ninja Turtles movie. Many of the one-on-one staples of game mechanics were employed by Midway, such as the best of 3 bouts, the life bar, and the bonus stage. But one feature never before seen in a one-on-one fighting game was the use of fatalities, which seen the player perform a series of intricate joystick moves and button presses to execute the move, and their opponent. Mortal Kombat uses an 8-directional joystick and 5 buttons, including 2 punch and 2 kick buttons, each further differentiated between high and low. Attacks can vary depending on the player's distance from the opponent. The game allows the player to choose from one of 7 different fighters, and in 2-player mode allowed both players to select the same character from the off. All player characters have a shared set of attacks, performed by holding the joystick in various directions, such as a leg sweep and an uppercut. The latter attack knocks the enemy high into the air and causes a large amount of damage. Most special moves were performed by tapping the joystick, sometimes ending with a button press. Unlike previous one-on-one fighting games, few moves require circular joystick movement. The game's blocking system also distinguished itself from other fighting games, as characters take a small amount of damage from regular moves while blocking. However, the dedicated block button allows users to defend against attacks without retreating, and the blocking characters lose very little ground when struck, thus making counter-attacks much easier after a successful block. In the single player game, the player faces each of the 7 playable characters in a series of one-on-one matches against computer-controlled opponents, ending in a mirror match against a duplicate of the player's chosen character. The player must then fight in 3 endurance matches, each of which involves 2 opponents. As soon as the player defeats the first opponent, the second one enters the arena and the timer resets. However, the player's health meter does not regenerate. After the 3rd endurance match, the player fights the sub-boss Goro, followed by a final match against Shang Tsung. Between certain levels, players can compete in a minigame called Test Your Might for bonus points, breaking blocks of various materials by filling a meter past a certain point through rapid button presses. The first material the player must break is wood, followed by stone, steel, ruby, and finally diamond, with each successive material requiring more of the meter to be filled up and thus awarding more points. In 2-player mode, both players can compete in a bonus stage at the same time. Now, let me get one thing straight here. This is a game I cannot stand. It is a game I have never enjoyed and could never, ever figure out the appeal of the game. The visual style, the use of digitised graphics, these have never looked good in my opinion. Even back then, in 1992, I didn't think they looked good. Yes, alright, some people would swoon over them, but they looked fuzzy and slightly out of focus. Even today, they look bad. In fact, not just bad, they look terrible. 1 or 2 of the characters look okay, like Johnny Cage and Liu Kang, but Raiden looks awful. I think it was the shadow that appears on his clothing that got caught in the digitisation process, but whatever it was, it looks bad. Then we have Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and they look okay-ish when standing, but when they're lying flat again, they look out of focus. There was copious amounts of large blood globules after certain attacks, and this helped the game stand out visually as well, even if it did look more like large blood clots. I will give the visuals a little credit, as the shadow looks fantastic. Not just a blob you would expect to see in other games. The backgrounds are dull and boring. In this stage here, with what looks like Buddhist monks, who are all fuzzy and out of focus, looking really bad. And then the Buddha statue on this stage. The rough edges look like it was edited in Microsoft Paint, but some backgrounds looked okay, like Shang Tsung's palace and the dungeon background for the final stages. The sound was, well, kind of down the middle of the road on the sound. Some of the sampled speech is excellent, really good in fact. It's nice and clear and doesn't sound garbled or muffled. And the sounds when striking opponents and hitting the deck all sound good. But the music is bad and provides very little atmosphere. And none of the tunes are memorable either. You know the soundtrack is bad when the most memorable tune for Mortal Kombat comes from the movie of the game and not the game itself. But by far, the thing I hate more than anything else about Mortal Kombat is the gameplay. Some gamers raved about the button to block, as this allowed the player to stay close and counter-attack. But to be honest, the method of pulling back on the joystick worked very well in other games. And the layout of these buttons on the arcade was all wrong, in my opinion. The button layout was like the number 5 on a dice, and block was in the middle. This meant that if you were using the 2 attack buttons on the left, you could use your middle finger to block, but when using the 2 on the right, you would need to block using your thumb. Or maybe I was the only person who thought like that. But compared to the 6 button layout of Street Fighter 2, all you had to do was slide your hand up or down a little for attack. The block never moved. It was always in the same place. This control method is just terrible in my opinion. The combat system was really old-fashioned compared to Street Fighter 2. There were no combos to speak of, and the combat consisted of hit once and nothing. And when you consider the Midway guys were inspired to create this game after playing Street Fighter 2 for so long, then it begs the question, why was the combat system so lame? It actually feels like it was modelled on Street Fighter from 1987 and not Street Fighter 2. Players had moved on from this one hit at a time combat and were wanting the fast, frantic action you would get from chaining combos together. Then we have the fatalities. I mean, what did this actually offer to the player other than a cheap thrill? The developers of the game stated that when playing Street Fighter 2, they would get frustrated when their player got dizzied, as you could never tell when that was going to happen. So when developing Mortal Kombat, they thought it would be good to have the player dizzy at the end of the bout, and it would be even better if the victor could rub salt in the wound, as well as decapitate them or something. And so they decided to create different fatalities for each of the characters. But as this happened at the end of each bout, I failed to see how that adds anything to the gameplay. If they could maybe perform it at any stage in battle, a bit like Barbarian in the Commodore 64, then maybe that would have added more of a strategy element or like a Hail Mary attack. But nope, it was added at the end. The fatalities would be perhaps one of the things that Mortal Kombat was famous for. That and the introduction of the PEGI and ESRB rating systems for games. But as much as I hated this game, and I do hate it a lot still to this day, it would become one of the best selling video games of all time in the arcade and in the home. The console war between Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo owners was red hot round about the time Mortal Kombat came out in the arcades. And with Nintendo's family friendly policy, it was obvious at the time it was not going to come out on the SNES, which may be why the arcade game was so popular among Sega fans. But much to the annoyance of those Sega fans, Mortal Kombat would be coming out on the Super Nintendo as well. The question was, which one would be better? This is the Mega Drive version, and straight away we can see more than a few differences between this and its arcade counterpart. The visuals are not a patch on the arcade, as the Mega Drive only had a tiny 512 colour palette. It was going to be impossible to produce even half decent digitised graphics, but on the whole, I have to say that Mortal Kombat on the Mega Drive actually looks pretty good. I mean, you won't confuse it with the arcader out, but given the limitations of the hardware, the devs done a good job here. The sound is average. By 1993, the Mega Drive was actually pushing 5 years old, and you could tell, especially in the sound department. Most games had pretty terrible speech, all garbled and tinny, and so did Mortal Kombat. The music was, well, just like the arcade, largely forgettable and rubbish. The gameplay on the Mega Drive was always going to be a hard ask. With only 3 buttons and 5 buttons on the arcade, it meant a 6-button pad would be needed. Admittedly, I never played this on a 3-button pad, so have no idea how Probe got around this. But I did play it with a 6-button controller, and so the moves are all executed in much the same way as the arcade. But what about the gore? Well, with all the upheaval caused by the arcade version and the congressional hearings in the States, even Sega decided it was better to be subtle, and so the gore and the blood was removed, but could be added with the aid of a gore cheat, and so Sega owners everywhere took pride in sticking it to their Super Nintendo pals, as their version of Mortal Kombat was obviously better. Wasn't it?
Excellent. Finish him.
I had packed my Mega Drive away long before this game got released. But with the grilling I was getting from Sega fanboys at the time, I was a little curious to see how it would be on the Super Nintendo. But there was no way on earth I was going to buy it. No way. Thankfully, a mate of mine knew someone who did buy it and gave him a loan of it, and so he brought it round to mine and we had a play on it. First off, the visuals are not great. They are better than the Mega Drive version, but still a long way off from the arcade, with each of the characters looking even more out of focus, which I didn't think was possible. And obviously the gore wasn't there, and SNES owners did not have a cheat like the Sega fans did to add it in, so instead we got grey sweat. Jesus Christ. The sound is vastly improved over the Sega version, although everything seems a little muted, especially the speech. The music is clear, but it's still forgettable. The gameplay did not require the purchase of an extra pad or anything, as the SNES controller already had 6 buttons, and so this game was easier to play out the box than the Mega Drive one. The question is though, did it play better? Any Mortal Kombat gamer will tell you that the Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat is a bad game. And in fact, it is not. I mean, Mortal Kombat is not a good game to begin with. But with the SNES version not having any gore or any of the fatalities, it shows Mortal Kombat for what it truly was. An average game with some cheap titillation thrown in to get people to play it. In my opinion, Mortal Kombat was a poor man's Street Fighter 2 and was very popular with one group of players, mainly Sega fans. But when Street Fighter 2 was announced as coming out on the Mega Drive, this made Mortal Kombat a hard sell on the Mega Drive. And I doubt Mortal Kombat would have been as popular as it was if Street Fighter 2 had been available on SNES and Mega Drive at the same time. I never thought I would be able to waffle on for so long about a game I hate so much. I did play Mortal Kombat 2 on the SNES. In fact, I actually own that game. But that's a video for another time. In closing, Mortal Kombat was a bad game with bad controls. But that's just my opinion. If you disagree with my opinion, then please feel free to comment below. And if you like this video, then please feel free to give me a thumbs up and a sub if that's your thing. And that's all from me, folks. Thanks for watching.